Throughout this course, we have gone from our files containing just a few lines of code to files that contain many lines of code and HTML, and it's getting a little unruly. So what we need to do is take some time to clean this up, and we're going to do so using two functions. One is called include, the other is called require. And these two functions allow us to bring in other files. So in the case of our markup, there is several of these elements that we don't really touch at all. They are just there for the sake of our page's layout. Like, for example, if we cut out the dot type and really all the way to this div element with a class of container, this is all just fluff. It's where our header is, and that's it. We don't change anything other than the value of the title variable. So what we could do is we could cut this out and put it inside of an external file so that we can include that in all of our other pages. So that, for one, the main page that we're working with is much cleaner. We don't have as much markup that we have to go through. But it also allows us to make changes across multiple pages by just changing our header, if that's what we need to do. So we are going to create a folder in the htdocs folder. We're no longer working within just 2.8 right now. And we could call this include or includes or inc. Many people choose any variations of those, and I'm just going to go with inc because that's what I typically see. And we're going to create a new file called header.php, and we're going to just copy and paste that stuff in there. So now inside of our file for this lesson, we can come in here and we can say include, and then we just need to specify the path to that file. Now we are in 2.8. We need to go to htdocs and then to the inc folder. So our path is going to be // that takes us back to htdocs. Then we have inc, then we have header.php, and there we go. So now we can go to the browser, let's refresh the page, and everything's the same. Even the wrong title, we see scope being used here. So we need to change that in includes. We'll change it to includes, refresh, and we see that change. So even though this title variable is declared inside of this main PHP file, we are still able to use it inside of header.php. because it is in the title element. It's also inside of our navbar there. So this kind of ties into the previous two lessons where we have talked about variables and global variables and scope. We have defined the title variable as a global variable. Therefore, it is globally accessible, and we are able to use that inside of a completely different file without any issues at all. Now, let's go to that page. We need to go to inc header.php, but we're going to see a notice here that there is an undefined variable title. So we are directly trying to load header.php, and title is undefined. And that makes sense because as far as the header.php file is concerned, there is no title variable at all. The only reason why it works here inside of includes.php is because we have defined our variable here and we are including header.php. So what we could do is this, if we wanted to. At the top of header.php, we could check to see if that title variable is set. So we're going to say if not is set title, then we will set title equal to an empty string. Now, let's just talk about this for a minute. The isSet function is going to return true or false. If title is set, it returns true. If title is not set, then it returns false. So we want this to execute if title is not set. But if isSet returns false, this code is not going to execute. So what we have to say is not isSet. The not reverses the condition. So if isSet is false, and we say not isSet, then it's going to turn that into a true statement. It's kind of like English. If you have a sentence with two negatives, it makes it a positive. Well, it's the same way in programming. Two negatives make a positive. And let's close out this code block. If we go back to header.php, now that notice is missing. Now, whether or not that's what we really want, I'm going to leave up to you. Do you want to see the notice if you are missing the title variable? I mean, that could be very beneficial. If for some reason you include header, but forget about the title, well, you might think, well, where's my title? And it might take you a few moments to realize that, oh, I didn't set that title variable. Whereas if you have a notice, it's immediately clear as to what the problem is. There is an undefined title variable. You need to set it. So I'm going to comment this out because as far as I'm concerned, I would much rather see the notice so that I know that I need to fix that as opposed to scratching my head wondering why something doesn't work. Okay, so we have included a header PHP. We need to do the same for the footer. So let's go to our includes.php file. Our footer is really just the closing body and HTML tags. So let's cut those out. We're going to create a new file inside of our inc folder called footer.php. We'll paste that in, and then we will essentially do the same thing. We will include a file, and in this case, it will be our footer. So let's have another PHP code block, include our footer.php. So let's make that change, and we'll be good to go there. So now let's focus on our PHP. Now, as far as this particular file is concerned, we are outputting the guitar names variable. So the guitars array and the guitar's name or guitar names arrays are really what we are working with in this file. So it's really okay that these stay here, but everything else doesn't need to be in here. The output function doesn't, and the pluck doesn't. And really, we could just go back to calling the array column function, but we'll just leave it as pluck for now. So what we can do is take out all of this extra code that we still want to use, but really these are utility functions. These are functions that we could use in many other files. So it makes sense that we put them in a new file that we can then bring in whenever we need them. So inside of our inc folder, we're going to create a functions.php file. Let's open up a PHP code block. Let's paste in that code. And that's really all that we need to do. Although with our sum, let's go ahead and uncomment sum. Let's get rid of where we bring in and echo greeting because we don't need that there. And let's clear out everything else. And we'll keep the pluck function just so that we have more than two functions. So now we want to bring in this functions.php file into our includes.php. And we can do that with the include. But I would say that this is something that we definitely need to make sure works because, markup, it's okay, really, if it's not there. But in order for this page to really work, we have to have the output function. We also have to have the pluck function. So we need to be absolutely sure that the functions.php file is brought in. So we're going to use a function called require. It does the same thing that include does, but this is going to give us an error if it cannot open up the file that we specify. So I'm saying functions2 here, which definitely doesn't exist. So if we refresh the page, we get a fatal error that it could not open the required file functions2.php. So it's going to immediately fail because it can't find that. So that is what we want. We want to make sure that we have the functions that we need so this page will work. Otherwise, we don't want anything to happen. So we will change that back to the real functions.php file name. We'll go back and refresh, and there everything works again. Now there's one other function called require once. And when it comes to something like functions.php, this is really the function that we want to use. Because what this does is it requires that file just once. No matter how many times we call require once and then pass in functions.php, it's only going to bring that file in once. This is very useful because you might be using this functions.php file in another file that you include. Like, for example, if for some reason we need to use our functions inside of header.php, we would have require once in here as well. Although in this case, we just need to specify functions or / functions because it's inside of the same folder. But if we said require in here, and then we said require inside of includes.php, then it's going to bring those two files in, although in this case, that failed. So let's go to header. Let's just take that out. Let's try functions.php, and there we go. Now, see, here we have a fatal error. Cannot redeclare pluck because it was previously declared. So this is where the require once will come into play. If we say require once, then everything's okay. It's only going to bring that file in once so that we don't have to worry about, well, did I include this file already or what did I do? What did I do? With require once, you don't have to worry about that. So we have just cleaned up our files. All of the HTML that we don't change is inside of our header. All of the footer HTML, which was just 2 closing tags, is in the footer. And all of our functions are inside of a functions.php.